Welcome back. Today we're talking all things LMAs, and we're going to share with you our tips and tricks for placing them. We would love for you to drop a comment below for different things you've found helpful in placing your LMAs.
Yeah, what are we talking about today? What's on the menu?
We want to talk about
Bacon covered shrimp. Bacon wrapped shrimp. No.
placing LMAs.
Okay. All right.
Which was harder, intubating or LMAs?
I don't know.
I think they have their own. They both have their own lane. You know, we're talking about a 4 or 5 lane highway here. They do. One of them is HOV lane. But no, it's one of those things where you kind of get told that it's easier or simpler than other things, and then you start doing it in practice and actually find out it's not so much. It's actually just as interesting, difficult, or weird as any other airway management skill or figuring out how to get a tube in. For me, it was a very humbling experience because I went in with the mindset that it would be easier than DLing.
Just slide it in.
Yeah, just slide it in and fit, and goes with the natural curvature of the airway and all this other stuff, and just put a little lube and just slide it right on in until you get in there and have to do it.
Until you tear their frenulum and their tongue, and you're like,
and
haven't done it, but I've heard.
The tip flips back, and you're like, it won't go.
The thing gonna go.
Yeah, and it's like, and they're like, what are you doing? And and then the patient, now the propofol is worn off, and now they're like, whoa, all right, now what do you do? And as a person that's new and don't know, you can give some more propofol. You can go ahead and put the mask on, gas a little bit. You can do a few things, but it's really just getting to that spot where you're comfortable and understanding what you can do in that situation.
Right.
So
you can gas them down.
Yeah, right. Initially, LMAs were giving me the blues, and they still have the tendency to play a little BB King on me.
I've definitely gone home feeling quite inadequate. Not being able to place LMAs. That thing is so humbling. You're like quite inadequate. Like, wow, how embarrassing was that?
Right, because it's supposed to be so easy.
LMA. Mm-hmm. Then you're like, well, there are different types of LMAs. One, two.
Yeah.
People have different airways, different problems. Positioning is still a thing, maneuvering. And then I used to be able to just do it with my fingers in. And somebody was like, well, till somebody wakes up and bites your finger. Now you need to learn how to do it without.
Well, they tell you can't use fingers. I don't put my fingers in the mouth and
not anymore.
So what am I
but
supposed to do?
In my struggling days, I was like, oh, I don't know why people are struggling. Let me just put my finger in. I was like, well, okay. You won't have 2 fingers at the end of the day, one of those days.
Well, I had one that wouldn't see it, and my CRNA just moved their throat, and they're like, look, you can feel it. And I was like, you can feel it? And the first time I felt it, I was like, you can feel it? That's kind of gross. That's weird.
Yeah, I've actually...
And then it seated. They kind of wiggled it.
I've actually had LMAs not seated, which I could not say before till this one taught me how to. Seated. Sit. Seat.
Oh, C-O, the word, yeah.
She
calls me sometimes. She's like, I don't say that's a word.
Seated.
I think that's what you're trying to say here.
It's seated.
I think that's what I said the first time. She's like, what are you talking about? But I've literally last week, I've watched a CRNA remove an LMA, suction a patient and put it back in. And I was like, wait, what? It's amazing. Mm-hmm. Then I've gotten comfortable with iGels. Do you guys know how many types of LMAs there are out there?
iGel's pretty sweet. I like all of them. And I to answer your question, there are a lot of LMAs out there.
I've used
we
the
don't
Ambu
have
one.
A lot in the United States.
That's a nice one.
Yeah, I like those as well. And Ambu has several different ones within their line too.
And you can intubate through them.
Yeah, I mean it's
LMAs are underused or undervalued,
because everyone has acid reflux.
Correct, but then there are LMAs that are made.
Me too.
I don't know where I was reading this. I'm like, we don't even carry those stuff, and they're shaped so differently. Some from South Africa, some made in England, some made. But in any case, I discovered iGel, and I decided that I'm going to stick with iGels. And then we ran out of iGel, and then we have to do the curve Ambu, and I'm like, sugar smacks. Now I have to learn how to do this. This is the reason why I always say you gotta do the thing that you're most uncomfortable with. Use the blades that you don't know how to use. Try to deal before you use the video so that when you don't have those things, learn how to bag a patient without an oral airway. And then the moment came, I'm like, I did not take some of my own medicine, and here we are.
Right. It's kind of like going back to what Lindsay was saying as far as when you learning to use the bougie.
Yeah.
Why not learn to use it when it's
When
not
you don't
an
need it.
emergency situation
Correct.
in school? You know, and when I did a couple of diversity CRNA conferences, one of the things that was kind of like a recurring theme was get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So, like you said, like let's do the uncomfortable things. Let's not use iGel even though it's available and I love it. Let's use this terrible bend over here, this one that doesn't have a curve to it. Let's use this one that's straight up and down. But I mean, obviously they have them here at this facility for a reason. Like eventually I'm gonna have to use it. So let me get comfortable with learning how this works with my patients, you know. Very important.
Have you had to convert in the middle of a case from an LMA to intubation?
No, but I've went from MAC to LMA.
Oh.
Yeah, but it was actually, you know, and it was a situation where I, you know, kind of pat myself on the back because I'd actually gotten spoken to about it with one of my cases, and you know, in debriefing with a CRNA, we were doing a MAC case. I think it was some type of pacemaker or something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was a little old lady, and I failed to remember, you know, circulation time was a little bit lesser. And so I'm just going with the profile, just going. And she's still talking. I'm like, man, this lady needs a little bit more. Next thing you know, I can give him like 100, 120. And he was like, you gave how much? And he was like, well, better get ready to bag.
You're like, I can fix this.
Right. All you can do is, and I'm bagging the whole case, just about, you know, because it wasn't a very long case.
Mass management on Typhon.
But you're right. So now I learned how, you know, I had a good mass. Everything was good. Wasn't a huge lady and everything. But I learned from that situation. And then in debriefing, of course, he told this story to another preceptor, another CRNA. And he was like, you didn't just put an LMA in? And I was like, dang.
Why didn't I do that?
I didn't even think about that as an option.
Because as a student, you don't think about that until someone tells you, and you're like, oh.
Right, and he was indirectly telling me, you know, he was just saying, well, I would have just put an LMA in. And I was like, huh, why didn't you tell me to put LMA in? But, you know, obviously I can still work on masking. But, you know, so another opportunity in the cysto case came up where just wasn't working with the masking. I mean, with mass management or whatever. They just weren't taking, you know, getting enough tidal volume and everything. And, you know, you're kind of teetering when you're doing a MAC case. You know, you want to give them enough, but not enough to where they go apneic.
Yeah.
And I was just right there in that spot, and I was like, you know what? I'm going for it. Grabbed the LMA out after, you know, gave him a couple breaths. I see where he at, all right. And we're going, you know, and got it in, tidal volumes, beautiful. I was like, man. And I went and told that guy who actually mentioned it. I was like, yeah. So I actually, initially he was like, he thought that I'd converted to
general ET
yeah.
tube.
And I was like, no, I just put an LMA in. He still breathed throughout the case. It's still spontaneous. And he was like, all right, good deal. And he probably don't even remember that conversation when
probably not.
He said I would have just went there because that was like 2 or 3
He was like,
ago.
why is this kid telling me this?
Yeah, and I was like,
do you tape your LMA?
I do.
Do you use a tongue blade to put them in?
I do, unless it's like a can't ventilate, can't intubate situation.
So how do you put them in? What's your process for LMA?
roll.
Okay. I use the tongue blade. I like to give them a little bit of fentanyl, just like 25 mics, because I feel like it just makes the LMA go in better. But then sometimes they don't come back breathing for a little bit longer, and then you're like,
they will
all right.
eventually, but yeah.
All right.
Agreed.
Dang it.
So when you did a tongue blade, like what's your goal with the tongue blade?
So it's like so before I was like really hesitant with the tongue blade, but I've gotten a lot better. Now I just drop that thing all the way down into their throat and then push up and away as if I was going to intubate with the tongue blade.
You're just spacing the jaw.
Yeah, because my biggest fear, which I've heard it happen, is you can rip that frenulum if you just push it down.
Oh, like the tongue is caught up behind
your LMA, and you can push.
And then you're pushing, okay.
Yeah, and you can rip their frenulum. Yeah.
Or the uvula. I've seen where the uvula was actually from people forcing things down into there.
Yeah, that's a bit rough.
When you meet resistance, and early on especially, and still now, if I meet resistance, I'm now about
It was
to
game
change
over.
something. I stop.
It was game, but before it was game over. I was like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, and then I just let my preset. I'm like,
Yeah.
look, I'm okay. Like, understanding limitations. I think that's a huge part of anesthesia, especially learning. Like, you have to push the envelope in order to be better, but it's also patient safety. You have to be aware of. And with me, the blind stuff is always like a little shaky with me. Like with LMA, you can't really see. You kind of putting it in without seeing it. You just understanding the curvature and everything and where it should be. Yeah. Same thing with like spinals and epidurals. You can't really see what you're doing. You understand an anatomy and like, this is where I should be. But with that, when I meet resistance, I'd be like, all right, I'm not gonna do it. And I've heard where people, they putting force under it, they get it in, but how did you get it in? What did you just overcome?
Yeah. Right. What
broke? What
at what
gauge?
Price?
You know, so definitely have to be in. I've had others where if you need to get it in, put your finger down there. Sometimes the tip will be flipped.
It'll flip, yeah.
Slide it in, or lift the head, or tilt it down.
Jaw thrust.
Jaw thrust. I was gonna say that.
And a lot of things. Even when I was asking questions about putting in a NG or OG, those were things. It's kind of like similar ways to manipulate it getting in there. And so definitely got to think about what you're overcoming, understand the structure and anatomy of where it's going, and then what you can do to manage through whatever situation you get in, because they're going to come.
Do you put air before? Do you remove the air before?
I leave it the way it comes in the package.
But you're going to get so many preceptors that say, I do it this way.
Yeah, but then I do
take
what
it
they
all the
tell
way
me.
out. Some put 3 cc's in there, just enough to get a little bounce on them. It's just, and you have to, when in Rome,
Yeah, like the Romans.
I don't put any lubrication on it. It's just globbing up your airway. It's like, okay. I put it on the backside. I just put it down in there and get a little bit.
How much lube do you put?
I use a little package and I put it just on the backside. And I put it in the package and like wipe the LMA on the backside over it so it gets nicely, so it's not gloppy.
Yeah, I do the same. I one little pack I put on the tip and around the sides of it, just to where it slides in the back. And my thing is, I've learned, like, some of the things you spoke on is once I get in there, I too use a tongue blade. I had one preceptor say, use tongue blades. Okay.
Some people want you to like lift their jaw up.
Right.
I'm like, I don't know.
And this is where I say, well, the jaw technique works, I think, because it really displaces, make room. But this is where we go again. I don't want to lose my finger at the end of the day. And then I'll use a tongue blade, and I'll have a CRNA tell me, well, you need to learn how to put it without one in case you don't have a tongue blade. I'm like, okay, that's a good point. I'll definitely learn that.
And then some say you can't put a hand in the mouth at all. So now
correct.
You
So now, exactly.
Yeah.
So now you're manipulating head, you're doing jaw thrust, and you're like, well, what about the tongue? It's gonna get cut. And then those who teach you to put that finger in the back all the way and follow it through.
But I've had one that didn't even want you to put the hand in there at all.
At all.
So I'm like, how? But eventually, something, like, you got to put something in the mouth other than
there.
the LMA.
Yeah. That's what the tongue blade, I think, would help.
But some have said, and I think some of that's cap. I think that's some bull crap. Just in the hundreds of times I've had to manipulate and work through, which I think is also a great thing, right? You're learning the many different ways
to do it
that you can do it, which is cool. But, we've all developed what's comfortable for us. And I'm with you as far as I get the tongue blade, I put that thing to the bottom, push the tongue back and up. With this hand, put the LMA in just to the back of the throat, let that go now, and I'm manipulating that thing in there. I mean, hopefully it slides in there, and if it doesn't slide, I'll put a finger in there. Most times it's flip back or,
So I have a question there with the LMAs. This is a very fun topic. I think if you have a patient who regurgitates, like, what do? Do you pull out the LMA, suction, or do you suction, then pull out the LMA?
Like it's coming out of their mouth.
And
you know it's coming out.
You got content from the stomach coming out.
I think you leave the LMA in place and suction around it because the
You pull it
LMA
out right
should.
now, it's holding, it's covering up their airway
Yeah,
a little bit.
So you just gotta
covering up
think,
the
right?
bottom.
That's right. So the LMA is covering up your glottic
pull it out,
opening.
it's
So that's
going
a
in there
good
now.
hood on top of it. So you take that stuff out, boop, everything goes into the lungs.
Yeah.
But I think that initially, probably when you're freaking out, the initial thing would be to like, oh my God, let me get that
Take
out
it
of the
out.
way.
Yeah, but
But-
suction first.
That's not what you do. Good. You got to suction
Now,
first.
do you Trindell or not?
Trendelenburg helps because the fluid is not going into the lungs.
But then it's more.
It's more coming now. Though.
But then
Coming
there's
out.
more coming out. This is where I
So
say
you
get
just leave them where they are.
that OG tube suction ready. Put it
Put
down.
it in the. Yeah, put it all the way down.
Put it
in
all the
there.
way down there before you move that
'Cause
LMA
you're in the
and start
esophagus. Now
suctioning.
you just go straight to the esophagus. Like
Go straight in
get
there.
all of it.
Now,
And then what do you do?
have you
Intubate?
heard of LMAs being placed in a prone position here?
I've heard
Or
of it, but I
lateral
haven't done
position.
it.
I've seen some bold enough to do lateral. We learned absolute no,
Yeah.
lateral or prone. But I've seen some that they, if they're going to be in this prone position and I can get to them, that's the main thing. For like shoulders, some people are like, even though they're in beach chair, I can't get to that airway up there.
Yeah.
So they're like, no, we're going to tube them. Versus if somebody was doing a procedure where they were lateral, but they're right here, I can get to it if I need to. They're not going to be manipulating and moving them very much. They go with the LMA, especially if they're, they have a hyperactive airway, they smoke, COPD, whatever.
Asthma.
Yeah, they'll go ahead and do the LMA versus a tube. So it all depends on situation, procedure, and preceptor, of course. I think we all have our way that we want to do it. I think I'm gonna put a tube.
I'm gonna put tube.
I'm gonna put a tube in. I've seen some CRNAs that say they haven't put in an LMA since school. They ain't put in. Yeah, I know that's. They don't do LMAs. Period.
Mind
Don't do LMAs.
Mind blowing.
I love LMAs.
Well,
now.
in Europe, there are some cases where
In Europe,
where you can use an LMA.
In Paris.
I've had the argument come back to me, and I'm like, well, in Europe, they also are not using Embu or the iGel to do them. Because there are about 50 other LMAs that we don't use here that they actually do use that are actually safe for prone positioning.
why?
Like they have suction ports?
Suction ports, the shape of them.
Why don't we
That's
use
a
them
topic
here?
for a long time.
Politics? Money?
Maybe, I don't know. I
Money.
have no idea. Have you ever used the LMAs that you can send suction through? Do they work? I think Embu
I've
has
heard it,
one.
read about it.
Yeah, I've read about it.
Apex.
Right, but no. Okay, now, other question I have. You hear that sound, I can't do it. When it's not, well...
Like when it whistles?
Not seated.
Seated.
It's not sat. Not seated.
Like the whistle? Like how it
the
kinda...
whistle. And then the surgeon
Or
on
like
the
a
other
little
side of the
snore.
drip is like, what's going on over there with all that
Calm
noise?
down up there, buddy. All right.
I
Do
hate it when they
you
pay attention.
remove it or do you leave it alone? If you leave it alone, what do you look at to
What are
decide
your
to leave it
tidal
alone?
volumes?
That's
That's
the question.
huge.
Okay, good.
That's huge. That's the main thing. Is just can they breathe, right? We're trying to make sure that they can breathe and they have good airway
How do you
viability
make the
there.
noise stop?
But
Okay,
I
you
had
have
someone-
good tidal volume and you want to make the noise stop. Can
Well,
you make
like
it stop?
Yeah, that's manipulation. That's what I was gonna say. I've learned this along the way because I was sitting there like freaking out. I can't figure it out. Sometimes I'm putting like 15, 20 cc's of air in there. I'm like, what? Or sometimes it's too high. So you have to push it down. And
Sometimes you have to turn the neck.
Right.
And
I've
let go
become-
quietness.
that actually, and that's just we talked about this on several episodes now, is just coming with the growth and learning process of figuring out what you can do.
Right.
And not being so boxed into what we've read or what we've heard. Like the experience that we've gained has just been so many more things you can do, like the manipulation here, turning their head, putting it in a little further, now pulling back, putting air in there, taking the air out.
Right.
And so many different things you can do. That worked. And, I remember sitting back looking at my preceptor like, they literally just did whatever. They just really just did whatever it took to get it to seat.
But it's knowing those steps. Like
And
I
that
had
you
a
can.
patient, that you can. I had a patient who straight up needed a size 5. And my CRNA
sizes.
said,
Sizes.
Sizes. That's a good box to open.
yeah,
Keep going
but
with the
he
story.
said, we put in a 4 because a lot of CRNAs are like, everyone can get a 4.
And mouth be this big. I'm like, what? A 4? Like you flipping that thing like a taco trying to. But go ahead. I'm
But
like,
you know
man.
they say that. Everyone can get a 4.
Yes, they do.
So a 4 wasn't seating, it wasn't working. And he goes, I've never had a patient just demand a 5. He's
Never?
demanding a 5. So we put a 5 and everything was fine. But
I look at the weight on the package. 99.9% of the time for the eye gels, it works. But then I went to an Embu.
because we don't carry size 6, and that's like greater than 100 kilograms. And most
That's
of
a
our
lot of people greater than 100 kilograms. Everybody.
But the 5 eye gel works on these people. But
Because
by the
eyegels are
way,
so much smaller,
I don't have
though.
any financial ties to eye gel.
We don't have financial ties to any of anything we talk about.
I just
We broke by broke.
But I'm just saying, like, but then I've had situations where I've had a dog, literally, he took it lightly and made fun. Every time I went with the weight, it was a different brand. And he was like, okay, we're going to go with that one. But he already knew that it wasn't going to work.
Because the weight doesn't matter on there.
So then it's like, well, you did really well today, except if only you just knew how to size an LMA properly for your patient.
But great preceptor, by the way.
Correct.
Let you figure it out.
Yes,
That's
absolutely.
Speaking to our other episodes, go ahead.
Then I asked him, like, what do you look at? He's like, I asked them to open their mouth. I look, and I'm like, all right, this is what's going to fit.
That's what you're looking at in your
That's all.
assessment.
It has nothing to do. It's not necessarily the size, because some people are super tall, but then they're their size, but then their airway won't
Some
be
people
able
are
to support
huge
that.
with a mouth this big.
This
Preceptors out there, come on.
But and then different brands, like some brands I feel like are more accurate than others. Some is like you gotta have to size down, although that's what you think. Some you have to size up. So, no, definitely my challenge there is like I want to be able to look at a patient and say this is what you're gonna get, despite what the packages say.
Yeah, because then if they're a big person too, you gotta think they got a whole bunch of jaw in there. They got a whole bunch of soft tissue in there.
So much soft tissue.
And they got a mouth this big with chapped lips, so all this from the split when you try to put a 5 in there, you know? You're like, how you get a bloody mess up there with an LMA? I do.
How do you get a bloody mess up there with an old airway?
Huh?
How do you get a bloody mess with an old airway?
When you're trying to put it in.
Or
Like,
chip a lip.
You're trying to put it in.
Or chip a lip with an old airway.
Like, oh, gotta put this in.
Does
You
that
end up
wrap it
under
up
the
for
drink.
LMAs? Any other fun stories with LMAs? That was a fun little topic.
You know, LMAs have definitely humbled me, and I'm grateful for the learning experience with them because I want to get good with them. I think they're a great tool. I mean,
They
they're
can
great airway.
save you, and it can't intubate, can't ventilate.
Yeah. And for those airways that are just crazy, you know, highly sensitive airways, it's always awesome. I used to wonder why people were so quick to jump to LMAs. I'm like, why can't we just tube everybody, you know, early on?
Yeah,
like,
'cause
just
you
put a
wanna
tube in,
intubate
you know,
people.
just put a tube in.
Yeah.
That's easier, safe, that we know it's there.
Yeah.
Versus understanding why, you know.
Bad
LMAs.
asthma. Really bad
You
asthma.
don't have to
They
go
need
into
an
the
LMA.
airway,
Yeah.
which is great. So, LMAs, I can dig it.
Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still